I was shamed by everyone, was caught, but damn it, I was a creative person and it was my calling. So I did it, and then I never thought my life would change because of a half-broken pencil and a scrap of paper I found under my bed. But here I am, sitting on the edge of my creaky dorm bed in a building where the walls are so thin you can hear your neighbor cry himself to sleep every night. The paint on the walls is peeling, the hallways reek of stale beer and piss, and every other night, there's some kind of shouting match or fight that makes you wonder if you'll wake up to sirens. Welcome to my life at 19. I didn't have much growing up, not a sob story, just the truth. No rich parents, no one pushing me to go to college, and certainly no one giving a damn whether I made it or not. But even in this dump of a neighborhood, I found something that made me feel alive. Drawing, sketching, whatever you want to call it. It started as a way to pass the time. When you're surrounded by chaos, you need an escape. For me, it was lines and shadows on paper, little pieces of a world that wasn't falling apart. I never showed anyone my sketches. Why would I? In this place, dreams get laughed at. But that changed when Mason moved in. The first time I saw Mason, I thought, this guy's not going to last a week here. He had that look, too clean, too wide-eyed, like he hadn't seen the worst of humanity yet. But what threw me off was the camera. He carried it everywhere, filming everything. The arguments in the hallway, the old man on the corner who swore he used to be in movies, even the stray cats that fought in the alley behind the building. Mason wasn't scared. He was fascinated. He noticed me sketching one day when we were both waiting for the communal microwave to heat up whatever crap we called dinner. "Hey," he said, peering over my shoulder. "That's actually good." I wanted to shove the paper in my pocket and disappear, but instead, I muttered, "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," he replied, lifting his camera. "Mind if I film?" "Why would you want to film this?" I asked, genuinely confused. "Because it's real," Mason said. "Everything here is raw, unfiltered. People need to see that." I don't know why, but I let him. Maybe because no one had ever cared about anything I did before. That night, Mason knocked on my door with a wild idea. "Jesse, listen," he started, eyes sparkling with excitement. "What if you took this out there?" "Out where?" "The streets," he said, grinning. "Murals, graffiti, whatever you want to call it. We could document it, show people something real." I laughed bitterly. "You think anyone gives a shit about art in this neighborhood? Who cares what they think?" Mason shot back. "Do it for yourself. Do it because you have something to say." That night, I lay awake thinking about what Mason said. Something to say. Did I? Maybe. Or maybe I just wanted to feel like I mattered, even if it was just a few strokes of paint on a forgotten wall. A week later, we snuck out at midnight with a backpack full of spray cans Mason somehow got from a hardware store clearance bin. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the can. We found an abandoned building a few blocks away, the perfect canvas no one would miss. Mason set up his camera, and I stared at the empty wall, my mind blank. "Just start," Mason whispered. "Whatever you feel." I don't remember how long we were there. An hour? 3? Time didn't matter. What mattered was the rush, the freedom. The wall transformed under my hands, colors blending into something that felt like a scream I'd been holding in for years. When we were done, Mason looked at me, wide-eyed. "Holy shit," he whispered. "This is insane." It wasn't perfect. Far from it. But it was real. And that was enough. We ran back to the dorm, adrenaline pumping through our veins. Mason uploaded a short clip the next day. Just me painting, no music, no fancy edits. It didn't get many views at first, but that wasn't the point. The point was, I did it. And I couldn't stop. Over the next few weeks, we kept going out at night, finding forgotten corners of the city and turning them into something more. Mason filmed everything, turning it into short, gritty clips. Slowly, people started noticing, but not everyone was a fan. The first time we heard the sirens while painting, my heart nearly stopped. Mason grabbed my arm, whispering, "Run." We barely made it back that night, our lungs burning from sprinting through alleyways. But we made it, and as we caught our breath, Mason grinned at me. "Worth it," he said. I laughed, shaking my head. "We're insane." "Maybe," Mason replied. But we're alive. And for the first time in a long time, I felt it too. If you like this story, subscribe to Thread Chronicles right away and listen to new stories every day. Let us know what you like the most in the comments. Write what you think about this and what could be done better. We became addicted to the thrill. Every night felt like a game. Find a new wall, paint something that screamed louder than the silence of forgotten streets, and disappear before anyone noticed. Mason called it our art heist. Like we were some modern-day outlaws, except instead of stealing, we were leaving pieces of ourselves behind. It wasn't long before people started paying attention. Dude, Mason said one night, holding up his phone. Look at this. He had uploaded a clip of me painting a mural on a crumbling wall next to an old liquor store. It was raw. Just me, the hiss of spray cans, and the slow reveal of a face I didn't even realize I was painting until it was finished. A face filled with anger and sadness. Eyes that seemed to say, I'm still here, even if you don't see me. The clip had over 10,000 views. Wait, what? I blinked, thinking maybe I was hallucinating from lack of sleep. People love it. Mason grinned, scrolling through the comments. This is real art. Who is this guy? Raw AF. He looked up at me, eyes shining. They're talking about you, Jesse. A part of me wanted to smile, to feel proud. But another part whispered, it's just a fluke. Still, that night, I felt a flicker of something dangerous. Hope. But not everyone was impressed. Especially not Officer Grant. The first time we ran into him, we thought it was just bad luck. We were halfway through a mural in a narrow alley when Mason's camera light caught his attention. Hey! A voice barked, and we froze like deer in headlights. A tall, broad-shouldered man in a worn leather jacket was standing at the alley entrance, flashlight pointed right at us. Shit, Mason hissed. Run. We bolted, paint cans clattering in my backpack as we zigzagged through alleyways. I could hear Officer Grant's heavy footsteps behind us, his voice crackling through his radio, calling for backup. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would explode. We ducked into an abandoned parking garage, hiding behind a rusted car. Mason was trying to suppress his laughter, the adrenaline making him giddy. Dude, we're gonna die, I whispered, trying to catch my breath. Nah, Mason grinned. We're gonna be legends. I wanted to punch him and hug him. Maybe both. Officer Grant didn't catch us that night, but he wasn't done with us either. Grant's like a freaking bloodhound. Mason muttered a week later when we barely escaped another close call. Does this guy sleep? Apparently not, I replied, wiping sweat from my forehead. He's gonna catch us one day. Not if we're smarter, Mason said, that mischievous glint in his eye. Besides, what's art without a little danger? I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't deny it. The risk made it exhilarating. But the danger wasn't just from the cops. The streets weren't exactly welcoming to two guys with spray cans and big dreams. Once, while painting under a bridge, a group of guys approached us, sneering. Look at these wannabe Picassos. One of them laughed. You think anyone gives a shit about your scribbles? I clenched my fists, but Mason grabbed my arm. Forget them, he whispered. They don't matter. But their words echoed in my head long after they left. Maybe they're right. Maybe this is all just stupid. Mason must have noticed because that night, he sat me down in our dorm room. Jesse, he said softly, you're not just painting walls. You're telling stories. People need that. Don't let anyone make you feel like it's worthless. I don't know if I can do this, I admitted. What if I'm just wasting my time? Mason shook his head fiercely. No way. You've got something special, man. And I'm not letting you give up. I didn't answer, but deep down, I knew Mason wasn't going to let me quit. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't want to quit either. As the weeks passed, our work became bolder. We started choosing riskier spots, near train stations, on the sides of busy streets, anywhere people couldn't ignore us. Mason's clips kept gaining traction online, and soon, we had a small but loyal following. But with more eyes on us, Officer Grant became even more relentless. One night, we were painting a massive mural on an old warehouse wall, a swirling mass of colors with the words, "We exist," scrawled across it. I didn't even hear the sirens until Mason yanked my arm. Jesse, we gotta go. Now. We sprinted down the alley, but Grant was faster this time. We could hear his voice getting closer, his footsteps echoing off the walls. Freeze, he shouted. But we didn't stop. We darted into a construction site, weaving through half-built walls and piles of rubble. I could feel Grant right behind us, but Mason had a plan. This way, he whispered, pulling me behind a stack of wooden pallets. We held our breath as Grant's flashlight beam swept past us. I know you're here, he called out. You can't keep running forever. We stayed silent, barely breathing. After what felt like an eternity, his footsteps faded. Mason grinned at me. Told you we're smarter. I shook my head. We're gonna get caught one day. Maybe, Mason shrugged. But not today. Back at the dorm, I stared at my sketchbook, the adrenaline still buzzing in my veins. Mason was editing the footage, humming softly to himself. Hey, I said suddenly, why do you do this? The filming, the risks, why? Mason looked up, serious for once. Because stories matter. And you? You've got a hell of a story to tell. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. But as I drifted off to sleep that night, I realized something. Maybe, just maybe, Mason was right. The city started to feel smaller the more we painted. Every alley, every forgotten wall. Each one became a part of our canvas. Mason's camera caught every moment. The spray cans hissing under the moonlight, my hands covered in paint, the adrenaline in our eyes as we ran from flashing sirens. But it wasn't just us anymore. Look at this, Mason said one morning, shoving his phone in my face. The video we posted last night, me painting a mural of a broken clock with the words, "Time won't wait," had blown up. 50,000 views in less than 24 hours. Holy shit, I whispered. The comments were flooding in. This is art with soul. Who is this guy? I need more. This speaks louder than words ever could, but not all of them were kind. It's just vandalism. Nothing more. This isn't art, it's destruction. Hope the cops catch him soon. I swallowed hard, the familiar sting of doubt creeping in. What if they're right? What if? Stop, Mason cut me off. They're not right. Art pisses people off sometimes. That means it's working. His confidence kept me going, but the pressure was building. With every piece we painted, it felt like we were pushing our luck. Officer Grant wasn't just a problem. He was an obsession now. Got another one, Grant muttered to his partner as they stared at my latest mural on an underpass wall. A pair of hands reaching for each other but never quite touching. These kids are getting bolder. His partner, a younger cop with a bored expression, shrugged. It's just some punk with a spray can. Not exactly a criminal mastermind. Grant's jaw clenched. It's not just spray paint. It's defiance. And I'm gonna put an end to it. We didn't know it then, but Grant was watching us more closely than ever. Every mural, every clip Mason posted, every rumor on the street, he was piecing it all together. And we were running out of time. One night, we picked an old train station for our next piece. The walls were covered in layers of forgotten graffiti, but I wanted to add something that couldn't be ignored. A single eye, wide open, staring out at the world. Are you watching? I sprayed beneath it. We were halfway through when Mason froze. Jesse, we gotta go. I turned to see the familiar glare of a flashlight cutting through the dark. Freeze. Grant's voice echoed through the empty station. We ran, harder and faster than ever before. But Grant was right behind us. My chest burned. My legs screamed at me to stop, but we couldn't. Not now. We burst onto the street, weaving through traffic. I could hear Grant's footsteps pounding behind us, closer, closer. Then Mason grabbed my hand and yanked me into an alley I didn't even see. We pressed ourselves against the wall, barely daring to breathe as Grant ran past, cursing under his breath. That was too close, I gasped. Mason grinned. But not close enough. But our luck had a limit. A week later, we were painting under a bridge when we heard the all-too-familiar sirens. But this time, there was no quick escape. Grant cornered us, flashlight in one hand, handcuffs in the other. Game's over, boys, he said, smirking. My heart pounded as I thought, this is it. We're screwed. But then Grant surprised us. You've got two choices, he said. Face charges for vandalism or help clean up the city's graffiti problem. Mason scoffed. You want us to erase art? Grant raised an eyebrow. I'm giving you a way out. Take it or leave it. I looked at Mason, torn. If we get caught again, it's over, I whispered. Maybe we should. No way, Mason whispered back fiercely. We're not sellouts. Grant's smirk widened. What's it gonna be? I took a deep breath. We're not cleaning up anything. Suit yourself, Grant said. See you soon. And with that, he left. But we knew it wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The tension was suffocating. Every time we went out, I felt like Grant's eyes were on me. My sketches grew darker, more desperate. Mason noticed. Hey, he said one night as we sat on the dorm floor surrounded by crumpled paper and empty spray cans. You okay? I don't know, I admitted. Feels like we're running out of time. Mason nodded slowly. Maybe it's time we get some help. From who? He handed me a crumpled piece of paper with a single name and number scrawled on it. Cole, he said. He's kinda a big deal in the underground art scene. I showed him some of your work. He wants to meet. I stared at Mason, speechless. You what? Relax, Mason grinned. He's legit. And he thinks you've got potential. Or he thinks we're idiots, I muttered. But curiosity gnawed at me. A week later, I met Cole in a dimly lit coffee shop downtown. He was older, maybe in his 30s, with paint-stained jeans and tired eyes that had seen too much. He didn't waste time with small talk. Your work's got soul, he said, sipping his coffee. Raw. Honest. But you're burning out. I blinked. How do you? Seen it before, Cole interrupted. Talent like yours doesn't go unnoticed. But you need direction. Direction? I scoffed. I'm just trying not to get arrested. Cole chuckled. Yeah, well, art's never been safe, kid. But if you're serious, I can help. Help how? Commissions, Cole said. Real money for real art. You in? I didn't answer right away. Commissions meant painting what someone else wanted. Losing control. Selling out. But then I thought about the thin walls of my dorm, the empty fridge, the constant fear of getting caught. I'll think about it, I said. Cole nodded. Take your time. But not too much. The world's watching. That night, Mason was buzzing with excitement. Dude, this could be huge for you. Or it could be the end of everything, I muttered. But deep down, I knew I couldn't keep running forever. I sat in our cramped dorm room, staring at my latest sketch, an empty street with a single figure standing under a flickering street lamp. It felt like me. Alone. Unsure. Pulled between two worlds. You're thinking about it, aren't you? Mason's voice broke the silence. I didn't look up. About what? Cole's offer, he said, sitting across from me. Commissions. Money. Not having to live off instant noodles. I sighed. It's not that simple, isn't it? Mason leaned forward. We can't keep doing this forever. We've had close calls, Jesse. Too many. I clenched my fists. But selling out? Who says making money is selling out? Mason cut in. You can still paint what matters. But maybe you don't have to do it while running from cops. I knew he had a point, but the thought of putting a price tag on my work felt like giving up. Still, the weight of reality was getting harder to ignore. A week later, I found myself back in that dimly lit coffee shop with Cole. I'm in, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Cole gave me a knowing smile. Good choice. And just like that, my world shifted. The first commission was for a small restaurant downtown. They wanted a mural that reflected the spirit of the city. I worked late nights, blending colors, capturing the heartbeat of the streets I knew so well. When it was done, the owner hugged me, tears in his eyes. This is perfect, he whispered. Mason filmed everything, turning it into a short clip that exploded online. People started reaching out, businesses, cafes, even private collectors. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. But something felt off. Do you ever feel like we're losing something? I asked Mason one night after finishing another commission. What do you mean? He asked, editing a new clip. I don't know, I shrugged. When we were painting in the streets, it felt raw. Real. Now it's different. Mason set his camera down. Jesse, your art is still real. Whether it's on a crumbling wall or in a fancy restaurant, it's still you. I nodded, but the doubt lingered. And then Avery entered the picture. Who's Avery? I asked Mason, staring at the email he showed me. A gallery owner. Mason grinned. And not just any gallery owner. Avery West. I blinked. As in the Avery West? The one who discovered. Yup, Mason cut in. And they want you. I stared at the email, heart pounding. Avery West wanted to meet, to see my work, to possibly give me an exhibition. It was everything I had never dared to dream of. But was it what I wanted? The gallery was nothing like the streets I knew. White walls, polished floors, people sipping wine and nodding thoughtfully at art that probably cost more than my entire existence. Avery West was intimidating. Sharp suit, sharper eyes, and an air of confidence that made me feel like an imposter. Jesse, Avery greeted me with a warm but calculating smile. I've been watching your work. It's captivating. Thank you, I mumbled, feeling like a kid at the grown-ups table. I want to give you a platform, Avery continued. A solo exhibition. Your work deserves to be seen. My breath caught. An exhibition? Yes, Avery nodded. But not just any exhibition. The exhibition. You'll be everywhere. Press, collectors, critics. This is your chance. It should have been the happiest moment of my life. But all I could think was, what happens to the streets? Are you insane? Mason nearly shouted when I told him I was hesitant. This is Avery West. This is everything we've worked for. I know, I whispered. But what about the walls? The streets? That's where I started. That's who I am. Mason ran his hands through his hair, frustrated. Jesse, you can't keep painting on abandoned buildings forever. You've got a shot at something bigger. Bigger doesn't always mean better, I muttered. Mason stared at me, eyes softening. Look, I get it. The streets gave you your voice. But maybe now it's time to make sure people actually hear it. I didn't answer. Because deep down, I knew Mason was right. But letting go of the streets felt like losing a piece of myself. As if the universe wanted to make my life harder, Officer Grant decided to show up again. We were finishing a commission downtown when Mason nudged me. Don't look now, but guess who's across the street? I glanced over and froze. Grant, watching us. Not with anger this time, but curiosity? What's he doing here? I whispered. Mason shrugged. No idea, but it's freaking me out. A few days later, Grant approached me. Not with handcuffs, but with advice. Your work's good, he said, catching me off guard. Real good. Thanks. I replied, confused. Look, Grant sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I chased you because it was my job, but I get it now. You're not just some punk with spray cans. You've got talent. Are you being nice to me? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Grant chuckled. Don't get used to it, kid. Just stay out of trouble. And with that, he walked away. Did we just enter the Twilight Zone? Mason asked, eyes wide. Apparently, I muttered, still in shock. The days leading up to the exhibition were a blur. Paint, stress, sleepless nights. But when the night finally came, and I saw my work on the gallery walls, surrounded by people who actually cared, I felt something I never thought I would. Seen. Avery was thrilled, critics raved, and for the first time, I wasn't just Jesse from the broken dorm. I was Jesse, the artist. But even with all the praise, all the recognition, I couldn't stop thinking about the empty walls back home, waiting for stories to be told. Jesse, Mason said softly as we stood outside the gallery that night. What's next? I smiled faintly. The streets. The gallery lights were still flickering in my mind when I found myself back in my dorm room, staring at the blank pages of my sketchbook. The exhibition was a success. Avery had called it a revelation. Collectors had thrown around numbers I couldn't wrap my head around, and Mason was already talking about documentaries, interviews, and the next big step. But all I could think about was a cracked wall behind an old gas station near our dorm. Empty. Waiting. I picked up my phone and called Mason. Hey, he answered, excitement still buzzing in his voice. Crazy night? Huh? Yeah, I muttered. But meet me at the gas station. Midnight. He paused. The gas station? Why? Because, I said quietly, I need to paint. The air was crisp that night, the kind that stings your lungs and wakes you up. Mason showed up with his camera, shaking his head but smiling. Could have celebrated with champagne, he joked. But sure, let's celebrate with spray paint in a sketchy alley. I grinned, pulling out my cans. This is who we are, Mason. He nodded. Always. The wall became my confession. A city skyline crumbling into pieces, with the words, "Don't forget where you came from," scrawled across it. Mason filmed every moment, silent for once. Jesse, he said softly when I finished, "What happens now?" I leaned against the wall, paint still staining my hands. I'm not giving this up. The gallery, the commissions, they're great. But this is home. Mason chuckled. So you're gonna be the artist who has a solo exhibition and still sneaks out to paint back alleys? Why not? I shrugged. They can have the galleries. The streets are mine. The next morning, Avery called. Jesse. Their voice rang through the phone. The exhibition was incredible. We've got buyers lined up and... Wait, are you painting in the streets again? I blinked. How do you? It's all over social media. Avery interrupted. Mason posted a new clip last night. Don't tell me you went out right after the biggest night of your career? I winced. I had to. Avery sighed, exasperated but amused. You're going to give me a heart attack. Look, Jesse, I get it. The streets are your roots. But don't lose sight of the opportunities you have now. I won't, I promised. But I can't leave the streets behind. It's not just where I started. It's where I belong. Fine. Avery relented. But at least let me help you find balance. There's room for both. Maybe they were right. But I wasn't ready to figure that out yet. Things moved fast after that. Too fast. Mason's videos gained traction, turning into a full-fledged documentary project. Urban Canvas, he called it, capturing every mural, every chase, every moment of doubt and triumph. He was my shadow, my hype man, my best friend, but even he couldn't keep up with the whirlwind. I was painting commissioned pieces by day, sneaking out to paint the streets by night, and somewhere in between, trying not to lose myself. The more people noticed me, the harder it became to stay invisible. And Officer Grant? He noticed too. Thought you were done with all this, Grant said, leaning against his squad car as I finished a mural in a quiet alley one night. I jumped, nearly dropping my spray can. Grant, what the... How'd you find me? He smirked. You're not as sneaky as you think, Jesse. Fame makes you sloppy. I sighed, wiping paint off my hands. Look, I'm not hurting anyone. I know, Grant nodded. Honestly, I respect what you're doing. But sooner or later, someone else won't. What do you mean? I asked, narrowing my eyes. Not everyone sees art when they look at a wall, Grant said. Some see a target. Be careful. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. And it stuck with me. Mason noticed the shift. You've been different, he said one night as we edited footage for the documentary. Quieter. I'm just tired, I lied. He didn't buy it. Jesse, come on. Talk to me. I hesitated. Grant said, people are watching. Not just fans. People who don't want me doing this. Mason frowned. You worried? Yeah, I admitted. But stopping isn't an option. He nodded, understanding. Then we keep going. Together. Together. I agreed. Avery helped me launch community art projects, using some of my earnings to fund murals by young artists. The city's forgotten walls became canvases for stories that needed to be told. I wasn't just painting anymore. I was giving others a chance to be seen. But even with all the recognition, all the success, my mind kept drifting back to that first night with Mason, spray cans in hand, hearts pounding as we ran through the streets. The documentary premiered a year later. Urban Canvas. The Jesse story. People called it inspiring, raw, a glimpse into a world they never knew existed. But to me, it was just our story. Me and Mason, two kids with a camera and a can of paint, trying to scream loud enough for the world to hear. As I stood in front of my latest mural, a towering piece of intertwined hands reaching for the sky, I felt at peace. "This is it, huh?" Mason asked, filming the final shot for the documentary's closing scene. "Yeah," I whispered. "This is it." In the end, I didn't choose galleries over streets or fame over freedom. I chose both, because my voice wasn't meant to be confined to one wall, one medium, one world. My walls, my voice, they belonged wherever people needed to see them. And as long as I had a story to tell, the city would never run out of walls to tell it on. If you like this story, subscribe to Thread Chronicles right away and listen to new stories every day. Let us know what you like the most in the comments. Write what you think about this and what could be done better.